Thank you, Aya. Thank you very, very much. It's so nice to be back here in Colombia, even though it's virtual. And I'd like to commend you on the great job that you're doing with your virtual services. And I'm glad to see that you're back live at least a couple times a month, which is a step ahead of what we're doing here in Canada, that's for sure. I remember being in Colombia very, very clearly. Don reminded me that I was picking tomatoes with him and some people uh, when I was there. And I remember a lot of sweet things that happened. And I love your community. I think that it is a magnificent manifestation of God. I also love Colombia. It's got all of the nice little things that a small town has, yet it's stuck in the middle of a huge metropolitan area. And I was so impressed with all of the bike lanes and the walking trails and all of the great things that could be taking place. Well, so my title today is What is Ours to Do? And uh, I'm always a little nervous to tell people what they should do. So this is really based on what it is that is for me to do. And you can accept it for yourself if you choose or not if you don't. The simple fact of the matter is that, like Claudette said, is that heroes are people who give their lives for something greater than themselves. And I applaud that. That's very meaningful at this particular time in this particular space and place. We're living in a world that you probably have noticed is somewhat polarized, somewhat split up, it seems. And I think that what we're probably missing the most is we're missing the vision that is required in order to be able to run our lives and live our lives effectively in the way that we move forward. It seems, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but it seems that we somehow or other have found ourselves on a pathway which is not necessarily leading anywhere, and that we're finding ourselves in circumstances and situations where our leadership doesn't really seem to have a goal in front of them that is larger than themselves. And what we require is we require each and every one of us to become heroes, to actually give our lives to something that's larger, and that's not always easy to do. So the short answer to the question of what is ours to do is to stop compromising our values in order to meet our opinions and really start using our values and maintaining them rather than allowing our opinions to affect them and move us into another way. John Fitzgerald Kennedy had a quote, which actually I keep on my fridge all the time. And the reason I keep it is to constantly remind me. And his quote is, too often we rely on the comfort of opinion rather than the discomfort of thought. And each and every one of us here, being good religious scientists, have a vision. And if you don't have a vision, if you haven't put one together for yourself, or if you haven't sat down and contemplated, then I highly recommend that you do that. That as we did when we set the intention for the day moving into this particular service, that we actually embrace the idea that we sit down and think what's of value in our life and what we're really for and what we're really doing and why we're doing it, to implement that value in how we live our lives. Now, I'll tell you, is the vision of CSL is a world that works for everyone, and the purpose is awakening humanity to its spiritual magnificence. I embraced these years ago, and I know that it doesn't fit everyone, and that's okay too. It doesn't have to. So, as I speak today, I want you to realize that the visions that you can set for your own life, that you put forward for your own life, are visions that you get to make up, that you get to put into place. And like I said, I strongly recommend that you get a real clear idea on what you have for values that match those visions. It's an important thing because we realize and recognize in this teaching, in this science called religious science, we realize that as we put something in front of us, as we place something ahead of us and lay it out, that if we keep our attention and intention on it, it must become manifest. It must become the expression and the experience of our life. It's not a question of it might, it must. And it doesn't matter how long it takes, because what we really have nothing better to do with our lives than to be able to build constructive, productive, valuable lives, and to do that in every area of our experience, whether it be in our health, whether it be in our wealth, whether it be in our creative expression, our loving relationships. We lay before us this idea and this ideal, and we move towards it. If you want to look at what our values are and what our visions are within CSL, all you have to do is go to csl.org and bring up the organizational design model called the ODM. And you'll see there what our values are, and you'll see our purpose and our vision and our mission statement. And I think every individual should have the same thing consciously in their own mind, consciously be aware of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And why is because that becomes the vision, that becomes the value, that becomes that which becomes implemented into the mind, and therefore becomes your expression and your experience. I was listening to the radio the other day, CBC. I'm in Canada, by the way. And I was listening to it, and there was a gentleman that was on. It was a gardening show with some great gardener called Brian Mintner that regularly attends the show. And this is the time of year when there's so much planting going on. There's so many seeds being put in the ground, bulbs, etc., that it's all being set up so that what we can do is grow our flowers and grow our vegetables and build everything. And this gentleman phoned in, and he was having some problems with his daffodils. Now, they were suffering some kind of a blight, and Brian Mintner told him what to do and how to rectify it. But the thing that caught my attention was the fact that he was talking about the fact that he and his wife had lived on the same property in the same place for the last 40 years. And what they'd done every year for 40 years is they'd planted daffodil bulbs in the field behind their house. So that what was happening was they were waking up in the morning and this time of year, and they would see this entire field just shimmering with yellow from the daffodils that they planted. And I thought, that's really what we're doing right now. When we plant that daffodil, we don't necessarily know what it's going to look like in the future. And yet we do. We understand and appreciate that it's going to become the manifest expression of the daffodil, and that it's going to lay there before us. Oftentimes when we have a vision, what we do is we place it out there, and there are a lot of naysayers that come along. There's a lot of people who perhaps think that perhaps we can't do it, we can't accomplish it, we can't create it. And the reality is that when we put before us what our values are, when we put before us what our vision is, and we head towards it, and we don't allow the temporal parts of our lives to be able to transform and change it, then the end result is that that must become our reality. So I'm seeing our society right now put before it things like equality, things like the value of peace and love and caring. And yet, I speak for myself, I often find my opinions are contrary to it, that they actually jump out and stop me from doing what I want to do. Quite often on my drive home, I'll drive down this street in my neighborhood, and there will be a homeless person with a sign that's there that says, "Please help." And I have to share with you that my value is to make sure that everyone in life is creative, is fulfilled, that they live in a peaceful surroundings. My value, my personal value, is to put love over anything else. And yet I can't help but hear my inner voice when I drive by sometimes as it screams out and says, "Why don't you just get a job? Why don't you do something different?" My lack of compassion in that moment is my opinion. And it doesn't count if that's not what I want. I don't want my opinion to become my experience. What I want is I want my values to become the experience. So we live in a world of separation that takes place around us. We're living in a world where not everything is working for everyone. And we find ourselves in a situation, and I do, where I'm saying, okay, my vision is a world that works for everyone. And yet my opinion sometimes is different. What's mine to do, and I think what's ours to do if you choose to accept it, is to make sure that my opinions match my values, not that my values match my opinion. In other words, to be able to put before me the ideal that I have and allow that to become my manifest expression rather than put before the opinion and allowing that to become my manifest expression. Because I'll tell you, where you spend your energy is what's going to grow and expand. So if I spend my energy on my opinion, if I spend my energy on hate, if I spend my energy on violence, if I spend my energy on withholding, then the end result, that will become the experience of our society all around us. And I think it's proven true over the last 10,000 years. So it's time for us to volunteer to step in to a conscious evolution of humanity. And that is to clarify what we believe in, what we want to see the world like, and to be able to step into that and have that as our priority that's laid before us, that's put there. And once again, it doesn't matter if other people support it or know it or accept it. It matters what we do. What's ours to do is to align our mind with our values. I know that the vast majority of humanity, they pretty much want the same thing. They want food, they want water, they want housing, they want clothing. They want their children to have access to technology and medical care. They want their lives to be able to match the desires that they have. And the way to get to it is to make sure that that happens for everyone. The way to get to it is to make sure that our minds are clear in what it is that we want to manifest and how it is that we want to manifest it and bring it into reality and bring it into experience for ourselves. I'll give you an example of a value or a vision that became manifest that I wasn't too sure was ever going to happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. About 40 years ago in the 1980s, my brother-in-law took it upon himself that he wanted to create a bike trail, not unlike the bike trails that you have in Colombia, that he wanted to build it alongside a creek, and it needed to run about 15 miles. And I can remember when he first got involved, a group of people surrounded him and they came together and they decided they were going to put this into activity. And there were so many little bits and pieces that had to take place in order to be able to make this so. I can remember that it was going to run alongside a thing called Mission Creek or Little Creek. Actually, it's a large creek that ran all the way from the Okanagan Mission all the way to downtown Kelowna. And it's now called the Greenway, and it's in position and it's in place. And when I retired, I bought a bike, so I ride it a couple times a week, and it's absolutely glorious. You know, you ride down a gravel trail alongside this creek, and there are people walking all along it, and the trees come over it and shade it, and there's all kinds of animals. There's big beware of bear signs, and there's deer that you run across on your way, and the creek is still productive, so there's people fishing in it. And I can ride for almost 15 miles on that. No stop, no block. But you know, when my brother-in-law had the vision to be able to bring this together and to be able to make it happen, it was all privately owned property. There were people all alongside the creek that owned the property that abutted to the creek, and there was no trail. Or if it was a very, very narrow little one path kind of thing. And I remember my brother-in-law, Donald, he went to work on it and he began grinding away at it. You know, he would run across landowners and they wouldn't want to give up right away to the property or they'd want to sell it. So it became from this one step of a desire and a vision, it suddenly grew into this monumental thing of things that had to be accomplished and done. Now, I really wasn't that involved in it because, to be quite honest, I didn't catch his vision. I didn't appreciate it and I didn't understand it to the depth that I see it now. But in hindsight, when I look at it, if it weren't for people like him, if it weren't for heroes like him who decided to give up their life to make it happen, it never would have occurred. Uh, he worked on it, and it finally opened in 2004. So it's been there for 40 years. It's been a project in his mind, piecing it together, putting it together, getting people to give up land, getting people to volunteer. And like anything, what happened was it started out as was perceived as an impossible idea. But as he began to move with it, each step that he needed to take showed up. Each thing that he needed to accomplish showed up. Each little bit of information that was required showed up. All of the money that he needed to have it accomplished was given. The land eventually was all ceded. The movement and the activity started from one idea, one thought within his mind. I'll share with you that around 2006, it was such a good idea that once it started to open, people began to look at it. And all of a sudden, other people got involved in other projects that were similar to it. And that we now have a circuit of probably 300 miles of trails that run not only through our town of Kelowna, but they run to the town to the south and the town to the north. And you can literally go on a holiday and you could ride for 3 months and not see all the trails that have been developed and built. It's a bicycle heaven, and it's such a wonderful idea. And it lessens the traffic. It does all kinds of great things. And it's all pristine and it's all beautiful and it's all a great thing to have happen. And it started from one idea. It started from one person who determined that they desired to see that happen. It became contagious and it became viral. It was a pandemic. And so I just look at that and I think what a magnificent accomplishment that is. Not just an accomplishment because he happened to be my brother-in-law and he did it and he accomplished it, but it was an accomplishment of an entire community that caught on to the idea. Now, if you do decide to go to the ODM, that's csl.org, and look up what our values and our visions are, what you'll see an idea. It doesn't matter what the name of it is, but you'll see an idea that's been implemented for a purpose to be able to move forward in life. You'll see an idea that is laid out and that it isn't always easy just to accept it the way that it is, because there's a lot of work that's involved that needs to be done. And that's what is ours to do. Our ideas must become manifest if they're clear and they're clean. Thomas Troward, one of our great teachers, said that, a living idea in the mind of God is something that doesn't need the energy of anything other than spirit itself in order to be able to become the manifestation. It's precisely where we're moving and what we're moving to. We have a living idea for our society right now. It's a living idea in the mind of spirit itself. It's conscious evolution. It's an idea of a world that's filled with peace and equality and understanding and appreciation, where everyone is respected, where our needs are met, not as privileges, but they're met as basic human rights, not just for one person or not just for one group of people, but for everyone. Everyone on this planet, all 7.5 billion of us. It's an idea which will go viral. It already is, and it will continue to do so. You've seen the transformation over the last 50 years in your own community, in your own country, in your own society. You've seen the transformation and the expansion of an idea moving forward. Is it enough? No. Is it complete? No. But it's sure a heck of a lot better than it used to be. And it's moving in that direction. And what we need to do is we need to lay that idea before us and put all of our energy towards it. We need to place it as a light ahead of us and move towards that light no matter what, no matter how. Even though the opinion says that it can't be done, we still need to move there. Even though our belief system says it's impossible to have peace on earth, we still need to move towards it. And the reason we need to do it is so that we continue to be able to implant the energy to manifest it and make it so. Where you put your energy grows and expands. If I allow the minutiae of my thinking, the neuroses of my opinions, to become the reality of my experience, and I put all of my energy towards them as opposed towards the vision that's laid before me, then the end result is that the minutiae and the neuroses will grow and expand and become my reality. But boy, if I put that idea before me, that is the vision that's based on my values, that too must become the reality. That too must become the expression. That too must become the form of my experience. Far too often, what we do is we compromise our values to meet our opinions rather than changing our opinions to be able to meet our values. When we as a society determine that that is the important aspect, when we stop putting the roadblocks in front of ourselves saying it can't be because there's not enough, or it can't be because this is less than that, then the end result is we will manifest a world that works for everyone. Now, this isn't just so for the bigger idea or the bigger visions. It's so for everything in your life, whether it be your health, wealth, creative expression, or loving relationships. If you want a loving relationship, that needs to become the priority of the vision of it, the understanding and the appreciation. If you want prosperity in your life, you need to put that forward. If you want health, you need to put that forward. If you need to be more creative, you need to put that forward. You need to prioritize. And I laid out a lot of needs, and I'm really talking to myself. It is a requirement of humanity to be able to put before themselves what they want as opposed to what they've got. Often what we do is we fall asleep. And suddenly our opinions become more important than what we believe and hold to be true. Every human being on this planet deserves to have love. Every human being on this planet deserves to be treated fairly, equitably, and with understanding. Every person on this planet deserves to be able to have their birthright delivered to them. And their birthright is the ability to be able to live a life that works. So we find ourselves in a situation and a circumstance where it appears that there's more to do than we have time to do. I go back to my brother-in-law and how he built the rail trail, or how he created the Greenway, him and a group of people that gathered together. And they gathered together and they took one step at a time. They didn't compromise. They knew that they needed to get every parcel put together. They knew that they needed to raise the funds. They knew that they needed to do the work, and they did the work. So when we look at the world around us right now, we know what we want. We know the type of world that we want to live in. So the requirement is to put our energy towards that and do it one step at a time. The requirement for me is to realize that my opinion is valueless as opposed to my value. To be able to drive down the street and see someone and smile at them and have compassion, understanding for who they are and what they're in, the circumstance that they're in. For me to be able to see what's going on in the world around me and to be able to embrace it, knowing that goodness must be the result of it. And that goodness must take place as long as I maintain the value before me, as opposed to the opinion that might block me from seeing it. Over the last year and a half, during this thing called the pandemic, a lot of us have been given an opportunity to be able to see the world through different eyes. And what we're doing is we're seeing a lot of the things that are wrong, which is the right thing for us to see. And what we're doing is we are moving forward to be able to change it. It doesn't appear to be that way sometimes when we look at the world around us. It doesn't seem to be working fast enough for a lot of us. But nevertheless, it's ours to continue to be able to put ourselves forward to make sure that that happens. It's up to us to choose love over hate. It's up to us to choose activity over silence. It's up to us to speak out and take the next step. It's up to us to do the work. It's up to us to stop waiting for somebody else to have the vision, because we already have it. We already have the value, we already have the understanding, and we already have the appreciation. It's up to us to embrace what it is that we know can happen, even though the world is telling us it's impossible. Because I'll tell you something, nothing's impossible in the mind of God. It's infinite in its dimension, and all things can become a reality. Years and years ago, I went through a time in my life that was filled with ennui and depression, actually. I was farming in Southern California at the time, and I was becoming a practitioner, as a matter of fact. And I found myself in a circumstance, in a situation where I was just absolutely flat. I had lost any idea or any call to vision. And so one day I phoned up my practitioner, my prayer partner, and I phoned him up, and he was a minister. He's now a minister. He wasn't a minister then. He was a student with me. And I remember phoning him up, and I remember saying to him, his name's Tony. I said, Tony, I need your help. And I don't want you to treat for me. I don't want you to pray for me. I just want you to tell me what to do. I'm tired, and I just want to change things. And he was a little taken aback, being that we were practitioner students, that I would even say such a thing. And so he thought for a little bit, and I remember him saying, Ken, there's 3 things that I want you to do right now to lift yourself above this. The first thing that I want you to do is I want you to start a gratitude list. A simple enough activity. I still do a gratitude list to this day, some 35 years later. He said, I want you every night to sit down and write down 10 things you're grateful for. The reason I want you to do that is because you realize how much you have to be grateful for in your life right now. He said, the second thing I want you to do is I want you to learn something new. I want you to take a course, or I want you to take a class. And the one I chose to take was a creative writing class at our local university. He said, I want you to put your heart and soul into that and allow that to happen. So I did something new, something fresh, a gratitude list. That was good. The third thing he said was, I want you to do your daily prayers. I want you to pray for something that is bigger than who you are and greater than what you think is possible. And I'll tell you is that what I chose to do was world peace. So 35 years ago, I started to pray for peace in the world. One small step. From there, I grew into my career and eventually became the president of RSI. And then I was the spiritual leader for Centers for Spiritual Living. I built a thriving church and community. And I did it every day praying for peace on earth. The funny thing is that when I first started, it was right at the time of the first Gulf War. And I can remember I was totally committed to this. And I remember when the first Gulf War started and the activities started to take place, society was saying that it was a necessity to use violence. And in hindsight, I see how easy it was for me to acquiesce to that. How easy it was for me to accept the opinions of others and realize the impossibility of what I was doing. And that lasted a very short period of time until my realization said, this isn't working that way. A vision, an ideal, those that make heroes, are things that are greater than ourselves. If they weren't, then they would be a goal. A goal is like a recipe. You know how to make it happen. You can, with your linear mind, you can work out step 1 through step 100 and figure out how to manifest and bring it into being. But a vision is something that's beyond our capacity and our capability to be able to embrace in our minds. Therefore, it doesn't require us, like Troward said, to put our energies into it to make it so. It doesn't require that we have an opinion to make it so. It requires that we hold it steadfast before us. So we steadfastly hold a world that works for everyone, even though everyone around us might say that's impossible. They're only saying it's impossible because they don't know how to get there, just like you and I. We must have the faith to be able to manifest and bring that into our expression and our experience. So what's ours to do? Ours is to clearly lay out before us what it is that we desire to have. And once it's clearly laid out, to put aside and cast aside anything that is unlike that and allow ourselves to move towards it. Whether it be a world that works for everyone, or your health, your wealth, your creative expression, or your loving relationships. To have the faith and the trust to know that once implanted, that ideal before us draws and attracts us and everything that's required in order to be able to make it so. We're in the midst of that right now. We see it all around us. It's not there yet, but what's ours to do is keep putting one foot in front of the other to move towards it and never compromise it. If somebody says something that is untowards, point it out. Don't give up. Don't lie down. Don't roll over. Just keep moving towards the ideal that we seek in our world. Do it on a personal level, and everything that is required for you to do on a national level or a universal level will be drawn and attracted to you. And when it shows up, do it. It's the next step. Because I'm going to tell you something. You have nothing better to do with your life than make it work for everyone. God bless you. Thank you for being here.